Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Royales 90 podcast. I'm your host, Eddie, and joining me to talk about that first leg between Monterrey and Vancouver is Felipe Vallejo. I'm saying it all whitewashed there for you. For you. Yeah, man, I contacted you last week. You were so gracious via email, did it professionally.
Mm.
Yeah. Usually I slide into people's Twitter DMs, but I had to reach out professionally to get you. So, really thankful for your time here. And so let's get into it. Let's get into this. You know what? First, let me set up the table because you are of either are you of Colombian descent or Colombian straight Colombian
I was
living in
born
Canada?
in Colombia. Yeah,
Oh,
I,
okay.
I, I
So
was
because
born
I'm
in Colombia and then moved here when I was like 4 or 5.
so usually I like to like dig into people's like, okay, how did you become a supporter of this, or just how did you end up covering this team? Um, so first of all, how did you end up in Vancouver in Canada? Most Colombians that I have ever interacted or in the United States are either in Florida or New York. So how did you end up in Canada of all places that is not very South American weather?
No, yeah, no. My family moved to Canada when I was 4 or 5, just because of the violence that was going on in Colombia. And so we actually moved to Ontario first, and I lived there for pretty much the majority of my life. And then at university, I fell in love, and the person that I fell in love with was from Vancouver. And afterwards, moved to Vancouver. We did long distance for a little bit, but in the end, I decided to move here since much nicer weather than in Toronto
Yes,
area,
that
uh,
true.
and a nicer city, I think, in my opinion. So yeah, I moved to Vancouver a few years ago now, and have been loving it ever since.
I hope it worked out. I'm assuming it worked out. Or did
Yes, no,
not
we're
work.
still
Okay,
together. We're still
okay.
together.
I
We're
was
living
about to say
together.
you
It's
made you
all
made that distance. So you see,
yeah,
we,
yeah.
we we're going from really serious, like the everybody knows the violence in Colombia during that period, and now we're going to love, and then now we're going into football. We just covered three things in like a span of a minute and a half.
Awesome.
Uh, so Vancouver, the Whitecaps. The second leg, I saw the second leg against Saprissa from full 90 minutes. Obviously, I can't take away. It's a small sample size. I can't take too much away, but from what I saw against Saprissa, it kind of reared its head against Monterrey in the sense that the guys failed to failed to finish off their scoring opportunities. But before getting to that, they did. Uh, Vancouver did lose a key player, and I saw your tweet and I retweeted it. Can you go a little bit into how that vibe was when his name is blanking me and I
Jaden
had it.
Nelson.
Yes, there you go. I was gonna say Nelson, but I was like, oh, am I gonna screw it up? Yeah, he went down 5 minutes. I didn't even know he was injured until like I got like a notification. I get the notifications for substitutes and all that stuff. I didn't know he was injured until I got that. How was that like? Because it was like 5 minutes in. It was pretty early into the game. How was that? And just elaborate a little bit more. Do you think he'll be ready for the? You think they'll gamble, considering it's 1-1? It's still open for anybody. Obviously, they have to go to Mexico, but what do you think they would be willing to gamble and have him play that second leg?
It's tough because yeah, I mean, firstly, the how was the vibe when he went down? It got very eerie up there because he just came into the team. He had a hot start. He's had 5 goal contributions in just 3 games. Really coming in just 2 games, and he's been by far the best player to start the season for the Whitecaps. And we were a little concerned, obviously, when he going down, especially considering that the Whitecaps have been playing every 3 days since the beginning of the season. There's been no warm up. It went from preseason straight into pretty much 6 games in 3 weeks, and so it's been tough. The new coach Jesper Sorensen was open to rotating, which is nice. I mean, the lineup itself was very surprising for me. I think for a lot of people, the fact that Jaden Nelson stayed in it though was something that was good because of he was our most informed player, but also concerning because I feel like he deserves a little bit of rest, especially since he didn't play all that much for Rosenberg when he was in Europe last season. So he's still not like, at that match fitness where he's ready to play every 90 minutes. I'm sure he would want to, and I'm sure he's still young, he's willing to. But I don't know if he's at that actual physical state yet. So a little concerned when we went down. We were relieved to hear afterwards that it was precautionary. Just he felt some tightness in his hamstring, and so they just took him off because they had to think about, we're facing CF Montreal at home on Saturday, and then we have obviously the return leg in Monterrey on Wednesday. Whether he's going to play on Wednesday, I think there's a better chance of him playing on Wednesday than on Saturday. I doubt that they'll risk him on Saturday, though. If he does play a significant amount on Saturday, I don't think we'll see him on Wednesday just because of load management. It seems that Jesper really trusts in his players to be able to rotate them freely because, I mean, in the lineup yesterday, that was the backup goalkeeper, the backup center back, the backup right back, pretty much an entirety backup midfield and striker all starting. Like it was completely rotated. And so I feel like Jesper is not afraid to do those things, at least in these kind of competitions. So it really will depend on, he said it was day to day. If by, let's say, tomorrow, Friday, depending on how he feels, if he's fit to start Saturday, I don't think we'll see him on Wednesday, but it really depends, on the day-to-day and the load management that they do with him.
And I guess, I'm not familiar with Vancouver, so it was a theme of backup. That first leg, because Monterrey, I would say only two players, Nelson De Osa, fellow Colombian, and Oliver Torres would be like two players that I would pencil in to be starters for Monterrey. So I guess both managers were like, if you're sending your backups, I'm gonna send my backups, and then we'll figure out in the second leg whoever, if we're still 1-1, 0-0, whatever, the second leg will be the deciding factor. So it was good it's good to know that both managers went into backups. But that when Monterrey took that 1-0 lead, how was the vibe where you're at? Because I felt Vancouver was pretty much dominant throughout the entire, I would say, 90 minutes, close to it. Monterrey had spurts, mostly in that first half, and then they get the goal. Is there anything you want to like bring up? Because I felt like it was one of those instances where if Vancouver just could finish, they would have the lead. But then you had Monterrey like withstood their best scoring chances, and then next thing you know, boom, they just needed maybe one or two scoring chances, and it's in the back of the net. And like I said, it was a thing that I saw with Saprissa. But what did you make of that? Vancouver again not being able to capitalize on their scoring chances early to get that lead, and then just it ends up in the back of their net. Midway through that first half.
Yeah, I mean, it was frustrating. It was confusing as well because I was there live, and from the press box, De La Rosa looked offside and like 5 or 7 yards, 5 or 10 yards offside. So we were very confused because as soon as he went through on goal, I'm just like, okay, I'm just waiting for the assistant referee to raise his flag and call for the offside because we know that they like to wait now. And when he didn't, I was very confused. And the fact that VAR didn't intervene or anything, just play went on. Yeah, I would say that the press box, I think the most of the stadium was frustrated and confused because I still I'll be honest with you, I've yet to see a replay where it shows that he's onside. And I don't know if it's because there's no angle that shows that he was off, and the assistant referee, they went with the on-field decision because they didn't have any evidence against it. But I've yet to see any footage that shows that he was actually on. Nevertheless, if he was on and a defender played him on, it's a poor mistake from the back line because usually they're quite good at that defensive line and maintaining it, well balanced between the back four. Nevertheless, stuff like that happens and you have to react. And I think that the way that the Whitecaps reacted, in the first half, especially in the second half, but in the first half was good. They had opportunities and they showed that they were more than ready to rise up to the challenge, because I know a lot of people going into this match, maybe not knowing that much about, the Monterrey substitutions and the backups, like a lot of people were saying that this for the Whitecaps is the biggest continental opponents that they've faced in their history. I mean, Monterrey is one of the best teams in Mexico, case in point. And while they face teams like León and Tigres before, Monterrey is seen as like one of the top ones, like
Yeah.
alongside America. So I think the fact that they played so well against a team like Monterrey, it really excited fans in that first half. So as much as we were confused by that goal, the response was really welcomed.
Yeah, because I felt like they were. It's one of those instances where a team's trying to punch above their weight, and I
Mm,
think I wasn't expecting Vancouver to just be like on like it was just like what they were doing against Saprissa. When they got those, especially when they got that first goal, where they were just creating chances, and Monterrey for their part, they at least withstood it. They had Esteban Andrada, who was the starter, lost his starting job, is now the backup. So this was a game to like, hey, we're going with all backups. Let's go with him and let's try to see if we can, you know, pick up his confidence. So he made some key stops in that game. But then you go over into the second half, those last 45 minutes, it was all Vancouver. Um, and they deserved a goal. There were so many I would count. I read it on SofaScore. They had like 6 scoring chances. They missed 5 of them.
yep.
They only they only converted one, which is the one late in that second half. But it from what you were expecting from Monterrey, because I was not expecting Monterrey to like, I don't want to say park the bus, but be very conservative in that second half. I thought, okay, we would stood their best shot. Let's get them now. Let's deflate the game. Let's get that second goal, and we have it. CONCACAF is still the region where away goals still count. So let's get that advantage and go home, and that's it. But Monterrey didn't do that. They got super conservative and they let Vancouver just do whatever they want attackingly. Because if you look at the attacking momentum on the SofaScore app, it was all Vancouver. There was no Monterrey. It was just if they would have filled out 11 defenders, that it would have been like nobody would have noticed, just because they were just defending for those 45 minutes. Were you surprised that Vancouver got so many, like in that second half, just so many scoring chances to have the ball at free will and do whatever they want? Because to me, that was kind of surprising to me, because even against Forge, Monterrey did concede scoring chances, and I thought it was going to be a similar game like that, where Forge just missed their opportunities, and then Monterrey just needs 2 or 3, and they'll convert, both of them or 2 out of the 3. But what was your take on that second half, where it was just all Vancouver?
Yeah, I was surprised because I remember, I watch the Forge games as well, and I remember Forge had chances early in the home leg. They had chances early in the first half, and then the second half, Monterrey kind of toughened up and they kind of asserted themselves more, and then there's where they start to score their goals. So I was sort of expecting the kind of response where, similarly, Monterrey withstood Vancouver's attack in the first half, and in the second half would come out stronger. But so I was surprised when they actually came out sort of weaker and they came out way more passive, and it allowed Vancouver to dictate a tempo. I was very impressed by a lot of the Vancouver players. JC Ngando, I think he was probably the best player on the pitch in the midfield. He was just shrugging off challenges. He was slaloming his way through the midfield, and he was dictating play in a way that made me, like, alongside Sebastian Berhalter, that made me really like confident that these guys can play a role. Because before, Jason Gando was on loan to a USL Championship side, the Las Vegas Lights, and before then he was a draft pick that was rarely chosen. So we really didn't know much about this guy. And the fact that he's come in this season, he's got a chance under Jesper Sorensen and made really good on it from preseason all the way until this game. It was very impressive to see that a lot of these backups, like we mentioned, performing well and dictating and dominating play and growing in confidence, because that was the biggest thing that I think Rajados allowed, is it allowed Vancouver to grow in confidence, and they started to do these little flicks and they started to do these one-touch passes, and you saw center backs start to take the ball into midfield because they realized that they had that space. And yeah, it was a game where it really should have been Vancouver Whitecaps, scoring a few goals, at least 3 with the chance that they had, if not more. And just the similar, it's almost like a curse that the Whitecaps have, because in all of the games against the Mexican teams that they faced in the last 2-3 years, in the old CONCACAF Champions League, in Leagues Cup, and now in Champions Cup, is that they play really, really well. They get a lot of chances, but they can't finish their dinner. And in the end, they end up drawing the first leg, going to Mexico, and losing the second leg. And unfortunately, hopefully for the Whitecaps fans, it's not going to be like that, but it's on the way to being that same sort of recipe. So in that sense, a little bit disappointing, but overall from the performance, I was so impressed by the team in the second half. And the fact that we didn't have to put on starters like Brian White or Andres Cubas or Pedro Vite until the last 25, 15 minutes, that was a good sign for how well the team played throughout the game.
Yeah, because I was, like I said, I was kind of surprised by Monterrey's second half game plan, and I thought they were going to get away with it. I thought it was going to be one of those games where yeah, we should have lost. We should have lost 4-1, 3-1, but somehow we were walking away with the 1-0 advantage. But Vancouver scored late in the game. Did you think a goal was coming for Vancouver, or did you think it was just going to be one of those games where yeah, they created so many chances, but none of them found the back of the net? What was your reaction when they were creating all these scoring chances, but nothing was coming on? Did you get that vibe where it's it's just not going in tonight, or did you think I think they have at least one in them late in the game?
A bit of both. I did feel like with how they were playing, as they have to get a goal. They have to get a goal at some point, get that chance to get a goal, because they just been creating so many chances that you feel like statistically even they gotta put one of these away. So I did feel relatively confident that they would get at least one. But there's always that concern that they won't get it, and then because they're pushing so hard, and because Rajados, they're such a smart team, an experienced team, they'll be able to hit on the counterattack and get the second one and put the tie to bed. So there's a little bit of anxiety on that end, because that's happened many, many times in games, and it's always that concern. My dad had a saying where it was basically, those that don't score, watch them roll in. And basically, yeah, if you don't score after chance after chance after chance, you're going to basically allow yourself to get scored on in one of these counterattacks. So that was my worry. But I felt like up until the 75th minute, I was pretty confident that we get a goal. And then after the 80th minute, it went from confidence to sort of desperation, because it was just like, they have to get one. Please, at least get one.
And they did. They did. So they're going back to Mexico 1-1. They both have a match this weekend. Like you said, Vancouver is hosting CF Montreal. Monterrey is going, I think if I'm not mistaken, they're going from Vancouver. They're not even going to Monterrey. They're going to just go straight to Mexico City for a game against Cruz Azul. So a lot of traveling going from Monterrey to Vancouver, and then from Vancouver down to Mexico City. For this second leg, let's start talking about it. What's your expectation? You kind of touched on it a little bit, where Vancouver doesn't take care of the scoring chances at home. They draw or maybe lose by 1 goal, and then go to Mexico, and it's just they get put through the buzzsaw. But this game is not even being played in Monterrey. They're going to play it at in Torreon, where Santos Lagunas play, because of Shakira, your fellow Colombian again. Shakira is having a concert there, and I do not know what Monterrey's planning and events department was doing when they didn't even consider they were going to be playing this weekend. Not but Shakira brings in the dollar, so I do not know there. But that's my only one worry, is that if this game was being played in Monterrey, I would be like, okay, yeah, it's probably going to be follow that same storyline that you laid out, because I've seen Vancouver do that against Tigres, right? They last year when they played on Vancouver Island, or is it Vancouver Island, right, or wherever they played last year, against
Yeah,
Tigres. Where,
Vancouver Island. Yeah,
yeah, so like where it was like I think they drew 1-1, and then they go to Mexico and Tigres kind of puts them away. I would that's the same story, but you put it in a neutral field. You don't. I mean, they're gonna have fans, but it's not that home vibe. So I think that's my only concern. Uh, what are some key points that either you have going into the second leg, whether it's confidence, like you said, that Monterrey allowed them to have that confidence. I'm gonna assume, yeah, 1-1. Maybe they feel like they should have had more goals, and I feel like maybe that's a confidence driver to say, hey, we can we can go toe to toe at least with this team. Or do you feel like because Monterrey did not put Sergio Canales, that guy's that guy's the motor to everything they do, and they didn't have Sergio Ramos, they didn't have some other starters. They did put Lucas Ocampos towards the end. They did put Berterame towards the end, but I feel like that whole game plan was just let's just defend this 1-0 lane and see if we can get out of here with that advantage. But I'm gonna assume they're gonna put at least I don't think a mixed lineup, but I think 80%, 70% starters, depending on how serious they take the. Well, they got to take it seriously because they're middling in that play-in spot for Liga, which is Mexico's playoff system. But what are your key points that you want to hit on going into the second leg, whether it's Vancouver related or Monterrey related, that really catch your attention? Because it's still anybody's game in this 1-1 draw.
I think one of the biggest things for me is the question of priority for both teams. How much priority Barthe Michelis wants to put on this competition, how much priority Jesper Sorensen wants to put in this competition. Because, like we saw, both what kind of went, let's play the B team in the first leg. Now, does that mean that they're going to necessarily play the starters in the second leg? I don't know because, Rajados have a tough game against Cruz Azul. We have a game against Canadian, rival CF Montreal at home again. And there's just game after game after game. And you have to deal with load management. We're at the beginning of the season. Rajados are more towards the middle of their season compared to us. So it really depends on how much rotation and priority I think both coaches want to put into it. Because, yeah, I think that I would love to see Whitecaps' strongest 11 against Rayados' strongest 11. But is that going to happen in a midweek game when there's important league games, sandwiching around it? I don't necessarily think so. So it really depends on the personnel. But I will say that I am confident going into that leg because of the confidence that was breeded in that first leg from Vancouver. I don't think that Monterrey, will necessarily allow them to have as much space and as much time and control of the ball as they did in the first half. But I still think with what they were able to do with the ball and the chances they were able to create, I doubt they'll create 6 or 7 scoring chances, big chances like they did in the first leg. But as long as they score, 1 or 2, and they get to actually finish them, then they're right back into the game. I think, now it's a little bit on Monterrey to conserve that away goal, because if Vancouver Whitecaps get that away goal, then it's pretty much level
Yeah.
on that ground. And Monterrey have to score twice if they want to go straight through. So in that regard, I feel like with the Whitecaps, as long as they play very similar to what they did then, and they have a couple more, maybe a few more of their starters like Brian White, Andres Cubas, Pedro Vite, uh, they'll be able to have a positive game. I would say that I'm cautiously optimistic, but obviously history tends to repeat itself, and because this has happened so much before, I'm not gonna, just tout that they're gonna obviously go and win because I've seen this movie before. But yeah, I feel confident.
Yeah, I think that I don't like that they gave Vancouver confidence because I feel like Vancouver just through their early part of their season is feeling confident because they destroyed Portland, then they get a win against the reigning MLS champions. They overcome a 2-1 deficit against Saprissa, so they've had some like really confident building matches early on in the season, and that's the thing I don't want, especially like I said on a neutral site. Uh, that's my only like worry is that it's not at home and anything can happen in a neutral site. That's just my only worry. Um, Just a quick question. No Sergio Ramos. I wasn't expecting him to travel,
No.
just because not a lot of players are like big on turf. A couple of weeks ago, Neymar started something in Brazil against playing on turf. Did you didn't expect Ramos to start or to go? I wasn't expecting him, but I just wanted to get your point on that.
No, I think a lot of us here learned the lesson from Messi last year because, the Whitecaps did this whole thing that Miami was coming, that Messi was coming to Vancouver, and everyone was excited. Everyone started drinking the Kool-Aid. I drank the Kool-Aid. I was like, I'm finally gonna see Messi. Oh my God, in Vancouver. And then the reality hit of basically the same situation. Miami, an East Coast team from Florida, flying all the way across the country to Vancouver, literally the furthest point in the MLS for them imaginable, in a midweek game, having to then fly all the way back home. You're not going to bring the spars, especially when you're also playing on turf as well. It's just not going to happen. So I think a lot of us learned our lesson. There's still hopefuls, which I'm happy about because it's always nice to have hope in your life, you know. Um, but I think most of us that were realists about it knew there's absolutely no way in hell because again, it was a midweek game. Have to travel to from Monterrey all the way to Vancouver, and then travel back to Mexico City for the game against Cruz Azul. Midweek game on turf. Sergio Ramos, 38 years old. There's no chance that he is setting foot in Vancouver. So it was more of a formality when Monterrey announced that Ramos wasn't coming. It was just like, yeah, okay. I was not surprised whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't think Vancouver have to do something like Houston Dynamo did this a couple of
Well,
days
where
ago?
do you think Houston got the idea? It was us because the
Oh,
backlash was so brutal from Messi not coming to Vancouver because the Whitecaps obviously advertising Messi coming to Vancouver as their main selling point. I don't know, people are angry that they were selling that as like, of course they're going to sell that. Think about it for 2 seconds from a business point of view.
yeah.
You're going to obviously advertise Messi when Messi might come. But credit to the Whitecaps, and I think the same for I think Chicago did it as well later in that season, and now Houston did it. Of like Messi, wasn't able to come because of how many games that Inter Miami's playing, and so they had to make a do and give those complimentary tickets. And a lot of people make fun of it, which is fine. It is a bit of a weird situation, but also you have to understand it's the best player in history, arguably. Like it's not gonna happen. Like you could have, I don't know, Paul Pogba come to the league. That's not gonna happen for him. It's only ever gonna happen for Messi, maybe
Yeah,
Ronaldo.
yeah,
It's a very, very special circumstance.
yeah.
So yeah, we had to do a similar thing uh for Messi, where it was as Houston, where we had to give complimentary tickets and we had to do a whole almost sort of like apology and yada yada yada. And it was Messi mania was crazy. I'll tell you that much from a Vancouver point of view because it was the
uh,
lack of Messi that really killed it.
yeah, no, that would suck. But I think it will depend. I think Ramos might play that second leg. Um, if Monterrey can like get a lead and just hold on to it. Um, because I think well, at least from my perspective, they have to prioritize this competition because how did they get into the Club World Cup? And you're able to convince these players like Sergio Ramos, Sergio Canales, Lucas Ocampos, and Oliver Torres is hey, we're going to the Club World Cup. Center around that type of let that be the carrot at the end of the stick, and because these players after making millions in Europe, they're not starving for money. This isn't their big payday.
Hmm.
So they've had that, especially if you can get them like 30, 31, where like you can still milk out maybe 2 or 3 years of their prime. So I want to believe Monterrey will take it seriously. Depending, like I said, it depends on whether how the Cruz Azul game goes. And if they take him out early, 60-minute, 70th minute at the latest, then I think, either he starts or maybe helps close out the game. Uh, but if Vancouver gets a taste of Sergio Ramos, what are you expecting from a 38-year-old Sergio Ramos against your beloved Vancouver Whitecaps? I don't think you've ever. If he does play against him in that second leg, how I just want to, because sometimes it's still a shock that he's still on our team. It's like one of those
Mm.
things where it's like, is this actually real? Uh, you know, if I would have told you, or somebody would have told you, hey, in 2024 or 2025, Vancouver Whitecaps would be playing against Sergio Ramos, what would your reaction be?
Before Messi came to the league, I would not believe you. After Messi came to the league, anything's possible. But I mean, if he does play, I mean, it's Sergio Ramos. He might be 38. He might not have the legs, but what he still has that is scary is he still has the intelligence of one of the best defenders in the world, one of the best defenders of all time. So the way that he reads the game, the way that he defends, it's just gonna be like he can be a one-man wall. I don't doubt that. And also, there's no better player to get into your head than Sergio Ramos. He is a big game player. He knows how to rile players up. He knows how to take players out. He knows when to rise to the occasion. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if it's 1-1 again in the 92nd minute. A corner comes and he scores and wins it for Monterrey. Like, I would have zero surprise because that's just what he does. You know, age for me, his age only shows maybe that he doesn't have the physical abilities that he used to have, especially when he was younger and he was playing right back. I don't think he's going to run as much, but he's still super clever, super intelligent. And I would be, I mean, if I was a Whitecaps attacker, I would relish it because you're playing one of the best
Yeah.
defenders of all time, but I'll also be very worried because you're not going to be able to do your usual tricks and stuff because he's seen it all. He's had to defend Messi, he's had to defend Mbappe, he's had to defend and play alongside them too. He's seen it all. So I'm sure that if he does start, he will put out quite a few fires if there's any
Yeah.
fires to be made.
No, and I think he's being more aggressive in terms of like wanting to score. Like this past game against Santos Laguna, he was like he was very aggressive in terms of like when there was a set piece, whether corner kick or free kick set piece, he was very aggressive wanting to score. I don't know if he just wanted to get that first goal or if like, hey, I'm going to take a little bit more risk. It's not I'm not playing in Europe anymore. Let me take a little bit more risk and try to be, a little bit more aggressive, trying to score on a header. So I think if he does play, whether it be as a starter or maybe coming off the bench, that's going to be something that Vancouver is going to have to look out for if he does play because he's been really aggressive in terms of wanting to score on a header, and I guess he's taking the risk there. So, but yeah, that's it. And just another player I want to get on because usually when I do these types of podcasts, a lot of people are familiar with Sergio Canales. Like I didn't know people are like La Liga sickos, and they're like, yeah, I watched that guy at Real Betis or Real Sociedad.
He
He
balled
didn't
out.
play in. Yeah, and he didn't play in that first leg. And you saw, like you said, you saw him against Forge. So I'm gonna take what you saw against Forge just because of the level of competition there. But if Canales plays, whether it's the full 90 minutes or maybe he plays like 45 minutes if Monterrey can get a decent lead like they did against Forge. What are you expecting, in terms of like, okay, this is a different game when this guy's out there against Vancouver? Obviously, Vancouver's I would like to think a much better side than Forge. But what are some things that you saw from what he did against Forge in that second leg, in those 45 minutes, that you think, okay, Vancouver is actually going to have to like look out for this because this can hurt them?
I think the biggest thing is because he's Spanish and he comes from that Spanish school of football. When he plays, he dictates play. Like I am certain that if Sergio Canales played yesterday against the Whitecaps would not have been as dominant, just because from what I saw from Forge and from what I remember when he played for, from early on, even at Real Madrid to Valencia, Sociedad, Betis, he loved to be on the ball and he loved to create, but also dictate play. And that's something that I feel like if he does play against the Whitecaps are not going to have that much possession because he gets on the ball and it's going to be very hard for you to take it off of him. And he's going to connect the midfield to the attack very, very well. Like he's somebody that's not afraid to recycle when there's the opportunity. So composed. Like I really love Sergio Canales and that generation of Spanish midfielders that came from like the mid 2000s to the mid 2010s, where he kind of came up through. Like that's what they're known for. So I feel like if he does play, what I expect is for him to just control the match through his ability, through his experience, and it's something that I'm hoping the Whitecaps have a plan for, because if not, then it's going to be a very, very one-sided match.
How big of a ego hit is that Sergio Canales would have rather played in that cold weather for against Forge, in that like that freezing weather, like in Ontario, and didn't want to play in turf in BC indoors, or are you like are you used to it already? Like you would of course of all things, this guy would rather be playing against Forge instead of like being on the bench freezing his ass off than playing inside indoor stadium on turf? Like, or is that not like no longer surprising to you because of the amount of
Eh,
players?
Yeah, it's not really surprising to me, because it's not even just turf. Because Tim Hortons Field is also, or again, Hamilton Field, whatever it's called now, is also turf.
Mhm.
It's just a kind of turf. Like the kind of turf at BC Place is not great. I don't know why it has not been upgraded. It has to be now or taken out for grass ahead of the 2026 World Cup. But I've always, like, everyone knows it isn't fantastic. Like I've even played on it before, and it's a little bit suspect even for like amateur level. So it's I'm used to it. I mean, it would be nice to see him come out. The fact that Lucas Ocampos came out was actually pretty cool, because another player that people will know, from his Monaco days when he came second to Raheem Sterling in the Golden Ball in 2013. So that was pretty cool. But like at a certain point, you can only face what's in front of you.
Yeah.
So like it would have been nice to see him, but at the same time, we'll see him in the second leg.
Yeah. uh, if Vancouver, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, if Vancouver pulls this off, it's arguably one of their biggest accomplishments. I don't know where you'll rank it, but if Vancouver does go off to the quarterfinals, where would this tie win rank for you, and you who have covered the club? Where would this rank if they were to get past Monterrey? Because still, as yes, it's in Mexico, but it's on a neutral site and it's 1-1, and Monterrey gave them confidence. But where would you rank this if they were able to get through?
High, because it depend, like, just on the face of it, just looking at the accomplishment without so much of the context, probably one of the greatest results in the MLS era, because the Whitecaps have been very successful domestically in like the Canadian Championship, like that, but they haven't had that many wins, you know, in MLS and continentally, right? They've always been sort of like a middling club. Only recently have they started to show signs of, aspiring to be better. So to be able to face again one of the most historic and strongest, richest teams in Mexico, which is arguably, the top league in the continent, it would be massive, especially, when you also consider the first leg, how well that they played. Yes, it was two teams of subs mostly, but if they go back in the second leg against Mexico, and yeah, it might not be, at their home ground, but Mexico is still Mexico. The atmosphere is still going to be volatile. It's still going to be aggressive. It's still going to be something that the Whitecaps players have to deal with. It's not going to be completely neutral. There's still going to be Mexicans supporting Mexicans there. And so I feel like if they do manage to pull this off, it'll be one of the best results, and it'll be a fantastic boost, not only for the team, but for the new coach. He's only been in charge of competitive games for 3-4 weeks, and he already might have one of the most historic wins in the MLS era for the Whitecaps. So I'd say that for the Whitecaps, if they manage to pull it off, it'll be something that a lot of people will talk about and remember for years to come.
Yeah, and just like I've kind of been like not tapped in, but I've been like consuming a lot of like Whitecaps content over like the last 2-3 weeks. I thought they were gonna get through Saprissa. They kind of scared me when they conceded 2 goals late in that first leg. I
Mm.
thought, okay, yeah, never mind. I don't, but uh, I think Vancouver's been going through like there's ownership, if I'm not mistaken, ownership news.
Mhm.
So I think their best or one of their DPs left like after one season last went back to England.
After like 5 months, yeah,
Yeah,
Stuart Armstrong.
yeah. So yeah, I think I'm assuming at least the squad itself wants to give the supporters like positive news, especially like how they've started the season. Last question, or yeah, second to last question. And you kind of touched on it a little bit going to Mexico, and every time I talk to anybody that produces MLS content, uh, Leagues Cup, uh, they're dialing it back now again. It's going to be no league stopping, midweek in between matches. At some point, this is going to come to an end, right? Or do you think both leagues are going to be like, no, it's not coming into an end. We're going to stick with it and we're going to go with it. Uh, what's your take on it? Especially, it's not here yet, but we're going towards the summer. We're already in March. We're just on the horizon of the summer months a little bit. We're going into spring. So, but every time I talk to somebody who covers MLS, what's your take on it? Uh, you do you want this to go away, or is this something the idea is right, it's just the execution that is very, very wrong, or you're just a fan of it? I want to hear your opinion on that.
I feel like the idea of it is nice. I do like the idea of it. I do not like the execution. I've not liked the Leagues Cup since it came in. I like that it's been dialed back because I thought that stopping the league for 3-4 weeks when it's already so congested for what felt like glorified friendlies did not make sense for me. I mean, from a marketing point of view, yes, you get these Mexican teams coming to Vancouver where there's a lot of Latinos and you get them out and it's a nice kind of cultural moment there. But aside from that, there's no real benefit. There's only kind of detriment because last season for the Whitecaps, going into Leagues Cup were in the top 4 of the Western Conference. Then Leagues Cup happened, and then right after Leagues Cup ended, the Whitecaps went on a winless streak and then tumbled down to 8th. And I can't help feeling that if it wasn't for Leagues Cup stopping that momentum, Whitecaps could have finished in the top 3-4 of the Western Conference, and it could have been a very different end to the season for them. So I've always seen Leagues Cup in its current format as a nuisance.
Mhm.
And I think initially it was created to really profit off of that Messi money, to have Messi now face Mexican opposition and have more games for Miami to play in. Because the first Leagues Cup, and I'd be interested to see if you saw it too, as somebody coming of a fan from Liga MX, but the first Leagues Cup was basically the Messi Cup. Like it was
Yeah.
tailored around Messi being at Miami and the Miami team and Suarez and everything. Like it felt everybody else playing was pretty much a formality. The
Yeah.
league only focused on Miami and Messi. So I was like, what the hell is this? Like, why subject ourselves to this? The second season it got a little bit better, but still, yeah, I was just not a fan of it. I feel like I would like a kind of tournament
Yeah.
where the best of Mexico faces the best of MLS outside of the CONCACAF Champions Cup because
I wouldn't mind this if
they're
if this was like a Carabao Cup, something like they would market it for like sporting reasons. It's like, hey, we want to. You don't have a domestic cup, Mexico. I know the MLS is not a big fan of U.S. Open
the
Cup, and
yeah.
and so they're like, we want to have this, or but if they can like market it that way, we're trying to emulate. If they were to say we're trying to emulate England, or like where they have 4 competitions, they have the FA Cup is where everyone participates, and then the Carabao Cup is mostly for like teams in the top 4 tiers or whatever, where it's not a competition for everyone. So I think if they were to market it like sporting wise and like beef up the compensation price, because you look at like CONMEBOL, like Libertadores and
Mhm.
Sudamericana, you look at it like we're in North America. Why aren't we getting like $20 million? How are we not at least give me $10 million? Like that's my
Fact.
problem. That's my problem with Concacaf Champions League too. It's like I get it. It you know only Mexico, maybe Costa Rica, and those in MLS are the realistic. But at some point it's like, can't we at least get half of what CONMEBOL does for their competition? And they're so that's my issue. Like, I'll either make it sporting wise or make it financially like lucrative, where it's like, yes, we want to play because the winner gets $10 million or 15, right? Something to be like, yes, we can use this for to go towards transfers or whatever. I do like that you get a Concacaf Champions Cup. I don't like that there's a third place. Two is fine. I don't know why they need a third. But
Mm,
going back to your other point, where it's like that first one, Monterrey was traveling all over the U.S. There was no like they went from Seattle to Portland. They went to Texas, then they went to LA, then they went to Nashville. From Nashville, they went to Philadelphia, and by the time that whole competition was over, I think we had like 5 or 6 players out injured, and Canales was like done for the year. Like all that traveling just killed that team. And yeah, I like your idea. Hey, just pick out 10 or 15 of the best through ranking or whatever, or however the teams finished last season, and then go from there. At least you know there's no stoppage of season, and if they can entice at least the prize money, that would be helpful too, because then you can say, hey, the winner gets whatever, similar to what whether half of what the Libertadores winner gets, but more than what Sudamericano gets. So I think that would be at least a start. If not, then just do away with it. It's enough is enough. But yeah, it's something that I agree with you there. But
especially
last,
when you look at the schedule as well, that's the biggest thing. It's like it's so unfair for the Mexican teams because they're out of season. They're out of season, and the MLS are in the middle of the season. And there's where I feel like you saw a lot of MLS teams beat Liga MX teams in the last two Leagues Cup, and people are like, "Oh, look, MLS is becoming
yeah,
the top league." And I was like, "Well, you also have to look at the context. A lot of Liga MXs are in preseason. This is you
and
look
there's
at
no
the Enver's.
traveling. Like there's no. I think what makes it has its issues, but at least it's home and away. You get that feeling. I think last year against Messi, that was like peak of what traveling to Mexico is. Mexico, as much as Messi gets a lot of support in the when he travels around the United States, I think only like 5 or 10% were like Messi supporters, and then the rest were just on him from like the get go. Like they did, they were like, no, 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 you're not gonna win this competition. Especially because in that first leg there was like drama
Hmm.
when they were like exiting and all that stuff. So like that was, I think that's like playing in Mexico on steroids just because of the contact. So I do like, and then some people I've read like there's some people in like that follow an MLS Cup that do like these away trips, right? They do like going to, I don't know if you saw any Vancouver fans go to Costa Rica, but I do like the traveling. That's always good to see. But yeah, I really hope that it turns into, if they keep Leagues Cup overall, they have home and away and all that stuff. Just to at least you know make it more enticing and all that stuff, not to just be a cash grab and all that. But
Yeah.
last question here. And thanks for your time again. I appreciate it. Uh, how did you end up covering the Whitecaps? That's something I should have asked earlier, but it's just kind of dawned on me right now. Like, how did you get into all of this, like covering the Whitecaps? Is it a team that, like you said, you're not from? You're not born and raised in Vancouver. Is it something you just, in terms of the Whitecaps, is it something that you just grew to love moving to the city, or how did you end up covering the team and just supporting the team?
Yeah, it was a bit of a weird story. I mean, yeah, you're right. I wasn't born and raised in Vancouver. I was mostly an Ontario guy. I followed TFC
Mhm.
during their like glory days when they won everything with the likes of Giovinco and Altidore. Um, but then when I moved here, I like when I originally moved here, I wasn't even thinking about being a journalist necessarily, a sports journalist. I was finishing my master's in philosophy and stuff like that, and then an opportunity came up to cover the Whitecaps, and I thought, well, I love soccer, and the Whitecaps are right here. Why not? Let's try it out. I was kind of in a lull period, and from there, it just kind of grew very quickly. The love of the Whitecaps. I went to the games. I started going to the trainings. I got to really know the coaching staff, the communication staff, the backroom staff, and obviously the players. And just from there, it was like an organic sort of love of the team and the atmosphere and the way that the club is run, to the point now where like I lived, 24 years, no, 22 years in basically like Ontario. But and like where Toronto FC is, but would, even if I moved back to Ontario, I'd still support the Whitecaps. It was just like a really nice organic growth in the care and support for the Whitecaps, and I just feel like it's a team that not many people think of. It's a team that it's not one of the first names when people think of MLS teams, but it has a rich history. It's the oldest, of the three, coming since 1974. And there's a lot of rich stories there. So I just thought, yeah, this is a great team, and now I've been able to work for them. I've been very lucky to be able to become part of the communication staff, and now I get to basically cover them, week in and week out, and I love it.
Uh, I lied. This is the last question since you said you were a soccer fan before. Following Colombian team that you support. Do you support any Colombian team?
Yes, I do.
And James Rodriguez in Mexico. Two things. Combine them. I don't wherever you want to start. I forgot. We have James in Mexico, and a lot of I think it's at Win Sports or whatever in Colombia. At least they broadcast their Leon games. So I just want to get your take on that as a Colombian, seeing your captain in Mexico. Just those two things.
Yeah, I mean, I do support a team in Colombia. I support Millonarios. That's been
Oh,
the
you
team
are
that I've
not gonna
supported.
like a. You did not like Efrain Juarez, did you?
Yeah, no, no, I did not. But I've supported them since I was like 13, 14. Even though I am from Cali, my dad was quite disappointed in me when I didn't choose a Cali team. But to go with James Rodriguez, yeah, I love it. I love that he's in Mexico. I was hoping he'd come to MLS because then there'd be more chance for me to see him. I was hoping that maybe he'd go to San Diego, and then he'd be closer to home, and then I'd be able to go and either he come here to Vancouver, or I would take the trip to San Diego to go see him. But the fact that he's going to Mexico, where he's obviously going to make a good amount of money, and that he's playing good football. I mean, we saw that even though he was a lot of people already said that he was washed. He was the best player at Copa America last summer. The fact that he's still continuing that level, and ever since he joined, Leon have been undefeated when he's played. So like, I love it. I love that he's playing well, that he's captaining the side, and that the team is doing well under his leadership, and he's still showing why he's an absolute baller at 32 years of age.
Yeah, I didn't know he was 30. I thought he was like mid 30s. I did not know, like when I looked it up when he joined Leon, I was like, I thought he was like Sergio Canales' age, where he's like mid 30s, but no, he's like barely in that like latter stage of late 30s. But
Hmm.
okay, I lied. This is the other last question. Colombia, where are you ranking them in terms of heading into the next year World Cup? Are you hoping they play in Vancouver, or are you willing to travel? Hopefully the U.S. and Canada tensions are over, but you know, where are you? Especially if James stays in Mexico for the past because the selling point was the Club World Cup, obviously. But if he stays there and if he likes it, and he's playing well, don't mess up. Don't mess up what's working for you and get yourself to the Club World Cup. But where are you ranking Colombia and all that stuff? Where are you with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think depending if it's viable travel, I'd be willing to travel. And I don't. There's not that many West Coast games compared to East Coast games in the World Cup. I mean, if Colombia was in Vancouver, I'd lose my mind. I think that Vancouver would lose its mind. I don't think the city's prepared for the amount of Colombians that would flock to the city. It would become Colombia 2.0, and I don't know if the Canadians are prepared for that, but I am confident going into it. I mean, lately they've kind of stumbled a little bit, Colombia, but they started really well the World Cup qualification. Obviously, the Copa America, arguably the best team. Unfortunately, it didn't go so well in the final against Argentina. But I feel like with the way that Nestor Lorenzo has the team right now, I'm hoping that with a couple of young stars coming in, starting to develop more, they'll be a top team. And I think for me, the biggest thing is I would love for Colombia to make it again to the quarterfinals or maybe even the semifinals if possible. You know, we saw that like Morocco went to the semifinals in the last one, so why not Colombia? And the fact that they're almost back in the top 10, I'm hoping that Colombia continue to do well. And then, in these last few games that they have, the last 6 games, they still have to face Brazil and Argentina in Brazil and Argentina, but hopefully they can secure top 3 places and really impress at the World Cup.
And to tie it back and to end this on note, Monterrey has like a really strong connection with Colombia. One of our top goal scorers in terms of club history is Dolan Pavon. A lot of Atlético Nacional players. So I know it's not gonna. I don't remember when's the last time we got a Millonarios player, but it's been all like Atlético Nacional. Like there was like a point where we had like 3 or 4 of them. We had Edwin Cardona, Stefan Medina,
Mm.
Dolan Pavon. Now we got Nelson De Osa. We did have Johan Ross, but we loaned him out. So I think I can't remember. Like it has to be like a while that we know. Monterrey has not at least had like one Colombian player. So like there's a really strong connection to that country with our club. So yeah, just ended on that note. We went from talking about dating and just finding your life, and now we ended it on this note. Felipe, where can people find your work if people want to hear your takes on this tie? Whether if you do something overall once a tie. I did catch your podcast at the end when Forge were eliminated. So where can people find your stuff and all that?
Yeah, you can find on my socials. You can find me on Twitter and on Blue Sky at FelipeV_FC. For the Whitecap stuff, I will write for AFTN, and I also feature on the podcast AFTN, which is one of the top ones for Whitecaps in Canada. And then I also write for an outlet called Northern Tribune. There I write more about the CPL and Vancouver FC, the CPL team here. And I have my own podcast called Coast to Coast FC, which is entirely focused on the CPL. So if you're curious what Canada's new domestic league, that's only 6 years old, is looking like, I suggest you go and check it out and see how things are. But yeah, that's where they can find me.
Well, Felipe, really appreciate you coming on. Hopefully, people find this insightful and know a little bit about your personal life. You know, but yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. If we ever have to play another CPL, now I know you cover the CPL, so I didn't know that. If else, I would have contacted you to talk Forge, but now I know that. So if there's another opportunity down the road, I'll be sure to reach out. But everybody, thank you for listening.